Mr. Davidson was arrested by officers earlier today on suspicion of sexual offences.
Last year, Jim Davidson was on his way to appear on Celebrity Big Brother when he was arrested as part of Operation U-Tree.
I thought Operation U-Tree was about, Jimmy Savile and paedophiles and God knows what. Why are they looking at me?
He is one of the most celebrated yet controversial comedians of his generation.
They don't come better than Jim Davidson.
His cheekiness, his naughtiness, he was wonderful.
So what do you want?
He said, give me a pint of Bacardi.
Jim's brand of humour is racist, sexist and homophobic.
They say, I am racist. Not racist.
For decades, he reigned as the king of Saturday night TV. But off-screen, his personal life was full of excess, drama and scandal.
There wasn't enough drugs in the whole of South East London to keep me going.
Within a year of being arrested, Jim faced no further action by police and has now emerged victorious as the winner of Celebrity Big Brother with a staggering 50% of the public vote. Love him or loathe him, Jim Davidson is back. In 1953, Jim was born in southeast London.
Glaswegian father, who apparently come back from the pub pissed and threw a bottle of scotch in the bed as I was just newly born and said, give it a drink for me. Right, that was the start of all the problems. When I was a little kid, I was always a bit of a show-off. I'd be at the end of the driveway in the little council house playing my Tommy Steele guitar. As people walked past, I'd be entertaining them. I was really bad attention seeker, worse than Lee Ryan.
Jim's desire to perform led him to audition for the biggest TV talent show of its day.
Well, Jim Davidson first came to fame when he won New Faces, which was a sort of 70s talent show, a bit like Britain's Got Talent, the only difference being that comedians used to win New Faces. Comedians never win Britain's Got Talent. So it was a massive show, probably the biggest show on TV.
Laughter time next, and to a fellow who's scored the highest mark so far in this series. 117 the other week, and a remarkable show that was too. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy him again tonight. Jim Davidson.
Well, the New Faces just started the series, and I was asked to be a judge on it, which I was thrilled about. And this young man came on with a mullet hairdo, nice looking, and was so funny. He was hysterical.
Paddy, he was sitting there, going down to London, and there's a bloke sitting there, bowler hat, briefcase, the lot. He said, good morning. He said, how do you do? He said, are you going to London? I am. He said, well, would you like a little guessing game? I don't mind. He said, well, I'll tell you what then, I'll ask you a question. If you can't answer it, you give me £1. Then you ask me a question. If I can't answer that, I'll give you £3. He said, right, I'll have some of that 3 to 1. Lovely, I will. He said, right, I go first. He said, off you go then. He said, right, what's got 14 legs, 26 eyeballs, 15 feet, and wears a wig? He said, I don't know, here's your £3. What is it? He said, I don't know either, here's your quid.
The evening that New Faces was shown, Saturday the 13th of March 1976, I had a gig near Heathrow in a working man's club. I got a standing ovation as I walked on. I hadn't done anything. People laughed more at your jokes. This is a piece of piss, this is great. Television's great.
On the back of New Faces, he started getting lots of regular TV work, and that led in 1979 to his own TV series, which ran for years, The Jim Davidson Show.
Come to think about it, I don't think our audience are looking too well here, right? But let's have a chat to him. Hello, love, nice to see you. How are you? What's your name, love?
Sheila. Nice to you, Sheila.
He was great with people. He had 2 personas. He had the Jim Davidson live, who was outrageous, and people loved that side of him. But he also had that wonderful discipline so that he could be funny without... Jim Davidson can be really funny without having to be filthy and outrageous.
He was endearing. I think he also looked like somebody down the pub or that you would see on your way to work. He looked like a normal guy.
I like that dress. Can you get BBC Two on that? Are you feeling well? Are you feeling all right? This your old man there? Nice to see you. How are you, sir? Nice to see you. All right. Looking well there. Honey puppy fat, that, isn't it? Swallowed a dog.
Jim was a huge television star because he was the young, cheeky chappie.
Bang about. Well, if I were you, mate, I'm no doctor, but I wouldn't go buying any long-playing records now. They won't last them.
There was a sort of an older guard. There was Bruce Forsyth, Jimmy Tarbuck, Ronnie Corbett, that sort of era. And he wore jeans, he was a skinny guy and he was young. And that seemed to be very much what people wanted.
He got his own show with his own name in it, which was, a really big deal back then. And he even won the TV Times award for the funniest man on TV, which sounds a bit daft now, but back in the 70s and 80s, It was almost like winning an NTA, National TV Award.
It was pretty huge, yeah, but totally fraudulent, I think. Because it was rumoured that there was loads of votes for other people floating down the River Thames outside Teddington Studios.
Jim's rise from cheeky comic to mainstream star was stratospheric.
In Jim's heyday, he was on Saturday night prime time every week. You just couldn't get away from him. And he had a spectrum of age groups that loved him.
Having starred in his own Jim Davidson show for 5 successful series, Jim's next step was to enter the world of sitcoms.
Morning, world. Jim London's the name, champion of the free. Free beer, free fags, free blind mice, free anything, mate.
Along came Up the Elephant and Round the Castle, where I played a character called Jim London, who had inherited his auntie's terraced house in southeast London.
It's Elaine, me trouble and strife. She's left me, ain't she?
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, mate, but where do I come in?
So I thought I'd move in with you for a while. You know, change of scene, take me out of myself. We'll have a few drinks, be like the old days.
No, sorry, mate, no dice. No, it's house rules, you see. All guests have got to be of the female persuasion. You know, squeaky voice, wobbly bits on the front.
That lasted for 4 years, and then I did a follow-up called Home James, where the same character, Jim London, played a chauffeur. And that lasted 4 or 5 years, and I'm quite glad it didn't last any longer than that.
They weren't great sitcoms, they weren't Galton and Simpson, they weren't Porridge. They were hated by the critics, but quite popular with the viewers. They were always top 10 shows, as I remember.
I've been a lover of sitcoms. They get on my nerves a bit. And then suddenly I was in one. So I don't look back at them with any great pleasure. I did it, and I think gloss over it and move on.
Coming up, Jim conquers Saturday night television. Is dogged by rumours of domestic violence.
In his autobiography, he kind of made light of beating up his wife.
And emerges as one of Britain's most outrageous comedians. Jim Davidson's rise to comedy superstar was unstoppable in the 80s.
What about this hair, eh? Fantastic, isn't it? My dad reckons it's the best hair in the world down there at the Elephant, because you can see it. Well, you know what you're getting, don't you? Oh, hang on a minute, I've got a lumpy bit here.
After starring in sitcoms Up the Elephant, Around the Castle and Home James, it wasn't long before Jim's next big success.
Big Break came along, and basically it was a comedy quiz programme about snooker, with snooker stars potting the balls very quickly and the contestants answer questions. Not only was it my first go at doing a quiz show, but it was also a chance for me to go on and just mess about.
Tools of the trade.
Tools of the trade.
Right, what's this?
Stick. Snooker stick.
Q.
Pardon?
It's a snooker cue.
Oh, yes, stick.
Tools of the trade.
Tools
What's this?
Arrest. Look at this. You're under arrest.
If you pitched Big Break now, they'd just go, yeah, see you later. But it was massively popular.
It's my new trendy hairdo, the Prince Charles look. Cut and blow dried at Fred's Hair Saloon, Salford.
Prince Charles don't have his hair cut like that.
He would if had it cut and blow dried at Fred's Hair Saloon in Salford.
Big Break. Wasn't that terrific? That should come. Now he should bring that back. Because he was wonderful in that. He had the public, he was in charge of it. Right, Jim, you do this one do that, this one. You know, that's him.
Jim was always a natural on TV because he had that cheek about him, he had that warmth about him, he was very down to earth. He was a charmer, really. He could turn on the charm. People liked that little sort of wide voice thing. And plus, he had the ability to ad lib, and he's very bright. So he could cope very well on television.
We've been together on Big Break since 1991. That's longer than I've been with all my ex-wives put together.
One day when I was recording Big Break, a BBC executive came in and said to me, look, Bruce Forsyth's gone sick. We're supposed to be shooting the Generation game tomorrow. Will you step in and do it for him? So I went in and did it. I wasn't particularly good, but it made Bruce get better very quickly. And when Bruce left, they had the perfect replacement. It was me.
Jim's natural wit and spontaneity made him an instant success.
I must tell you, it's my ex-wife's birthday today. Because I wanted something to do the trick, I bought her a Jaguar. What about that? Yeah, it certainly did the trick. You know, when she opened the cage, he leapt out and bit her head clean off.
The pinnacle of Jim's career was obviously getting the Generation Game. You know, it was the biggest show on BBC One on a Saturday night, so he was the king of Saturday night TV.
I could be in front of the camera, imagining a man, a wife and two children, one 9 and one 7, watching it, and I had to entertain all them. And so I could just be a clown and be inventive and make things up, and I adored it. I loved it. Took over my life, and it paid me a fortune.
Not really nice.
Okay, no.
No.
Okay.
It showed Jim at his best. He was having to think on his feet, he was having to deal with the public, and he was having to make himself look a fool as well.
Basically, what this does is make a lovely big rosette, you see. Pull it out and shove it back in. Just like that.
Jim was pretty much directing it as much as the director was, and he was filling the gaps with funny putty and just making it almost surreal in places.
Who could follow Bruce as successfully as Jim did? He made it his own.
However, Jim's on-screen success was being overshadowed by his chaotic personal life.
Everything he does, he takes as far as he can go. So naturally, with women, he did that to excess too.
My marriages are quite simple to work out, really. There seems a lot, but I am very old. I married Sue when I was 17. Then I got married to Julie. We had a courtship very quickly. And I got married to a girl called Alison Holloway. And I said, right, that's it, no more women for me. Then I got married to Tracy Hilton and had 3 wonderful children. And then I met Michelle, and we've been together 12 years.
Jim's larger-than-life personality was starting to cause problems.
He would go missing for days on end. He would go absolutely drink. He wouldn't just have beer. He'd be all round the top shelf and everything, you know. So he was a proper troubled boy, which has resulted in lots of headlines and why the tabloids loved him.
And it wasn't only alcohol causing problems.
One of the downfalls of a successful career is you're always thinking it's going to be over. So you tend, when you're not working, to try and keep up the adrenaline of when you're on stage. I've always been an addictive personality. I was gigging a lot. I was just overdoing everything. It was then the old coke started flying in, and that started to get the better of me a bit.
I never saw that side of Jim. In all the years I've known him, I never knew that he had a problem with cocaine or anything like that. The only dark side that Jim has is maybe when he has a drink, you know, he becomes a little bit dangerous. And I always remember him saying, he said, I like my whiskey like I like my women. I said, what's that then? He said, about 18 years old and mixed up with coke. That's one of my gags, by the way.
With mounting problems in his personal life, things were about to get a lot worse.
The third marriage was a mistake for Alison and I. We're both the first to admit that. There was reports of domestic violence. Well, you sort of had to be there and realise it takes 2 hands to clap. And so you move on, accept the allegation on the chin, try and gloss over it and carry on with your life.
He did it, his third wife, but they used to fight like cat and dogs, and she used to give as good as she got. I mean, she would throw the first punch. Not that I'm saying it excuses it, because it doesn't. It's never acceptable.
In his autobiography, he kind of made light of beating up his wife. He made light of it. It's just appalling behaviour, absolutely appalling behaviour. Maybe his celebrity prevented people from taking action, but he should have been stopped.
Isn't it strange that Lou Reed, who used to beat up his first wife Betty all the time, so much she looked like a panda, she had so many black eyes, is fated by the same trendy people who hate Jim because he once had a fight with one of his wives who was just as far as he was. Both wrong, but one gets treated differently because they're perceived as being hip, while the other one is perceived as being crusty old reactionary Jim.
It was a very volatile... It's a period of my life, I think, both of our lives, that we want to forget and gloss over. Nobody condones domestic violence. I've been accused of it, but you know, I know the real stories, and I sleep well.
Jim's troubles were not only at home. His most famous comedy character, the notorious Chalky White, was coming under increasing scrutiny.
I've got Chalky in a pub, Christmas Eve, we're all having a nice drink together. I said, what do you want?
He said, give me a pint of Bacardi with some ice in it.
I went to school with a lot of black guys, and decided to make one of them funny and create this Chalky character.
If you imagine the worst cod Jamaican accent you can, the most idiotic man you could ever meet, and that's basically Chalky White. Why he thought that would be offensive, God only knows.
Always had some terrible bad luck, Chalky. I mean, he's got this car, he's got a brand new 1963 Vauxhall Cresta, got to the traffic light. He broke down at the lights and broke me AA's, walked up. He said, you broke down, hey? Hey? Hey!
When I was younger and we used to hear Chalky in the house on TV, my parents would cuss. We don't know nobody called Chalky, and how dare he?
He said, man, I broke down. I broke down, I'm here in the car, innit?
He said, your battery's flat.
I don't know what shape it should be.
I remember just watching the television thinking, I can't believe he's doing this. I can't believe that just doesn't seem right to me, although the general consensus was not that. The general consensus was that it's okay.
You know, Jim would stand and do his Chalky routine and everybody laughed, including, you know, black people that were in the audience.
He's doing an accent, so he must be racist. No. Well, a poo on The Simpsons makes you laugh because he's got a funny accent. Accents can be funny. The French accents on Hello Hello are funny.
He had to tinker around with it, shut the bonnet down. He said, start it up. It started straight away. He said,
Man, they're fantastic, innit?
what was the matter with it? He said, you got crap in the carburettor.
He said, how often I got to do that?
In the playground, we would comment on Chalky and, you know, and say, how could he have said that? But it was just left there. It was in the playground. And then we would go, we'd all agree, like, I can't believe he said that, then go to class. As I got older, I more understood that socially it was acceptable for him to be able to say something like that.
Jim isn't racist at all, or sexist. But the humour back in the 70s, it was that. And that's what made it funny. You cannot do that sort of humour today. And I think Jim, I hope, has learnt that.
Well, Brixton's a nice place. There is one or two coloured people living there. They're very nice people, but there is, you know, a lot of them. Well, 1 or 2 million. When it gets dark at 2:30 in Brixton, you must... Oh, yeah, that lower all the toilet doors, stop the limbo dancers getting in for nothing. That's what you laugh at. You imagine sitting there and a pair of brown knees comes under the door.
I think it did an awful lot of damage to race relations. The whole thing was racist, and it should never have been allowed on television. Should never have been allowed on television.
Everybody knows that Chalky was a racist thing, right? Even if Jim Davidson looked at it that we used to call our friend Chalky, there was no love in that term, right? I mean, you know, referring to somebody black as chalk, right? You know, you know what you're doing. We're not idiots.
In Dubai, where I lived, there's none of that. None of that. I said to my driver, Kashif, who's a Pakistani lad, would it offend you if I called you a Paki? You know what he said? I am a Paki. In dead seriousness. I said, well, then what would offend you? He said, call me Indian. I never, ever go on stage to upset anybody, unless it's some pissed heckler who just happens to be Indian, one-legged lesbian.
Another target for Jim's comedy was women.
His humour in the 70s and 80s was quite masculine, and as the humour was of those days, it was quite sexist.
Gay women, rug munchers, I don't understand much about that at all. I like seeing the films of them, I fucking do. I always whiz the blokes forward because they've all got bigger cocks than me. I fucking hate that, don't you? And the wife says, look at his knob. Special effects. I like the women having a little go. You know, I think women look great with blonde hair and little black beards. And they know what bit to lick, I suppose, don't they? I ain't got a fucking clue. I just do the lot, do a circuit. You know when you hit something nice, they go, ooh, what was that?
A great bit of my stage act is me pointing out just how much I don't understand women. I think women know how complex they are as well. I always say, if you come with a manual about how you work, you still couldn't do it.
Oh, no, he's looking at me tits, he's looking at me tits, he's looking at me tits.
Why sit in the front row if you've got tits like fucking Copper's helmet standing out? I wouldn't sit...
You know, I think he loves women. He always has. He's had enough wives.
And I don't mind being a sexist. If it means if I'm the breadwinner, or if it means I open the door for a lady, or if it means that, you know, I realise they can't reverse park a car, and if it means that I do jokes about women pilots, they shouldn't do it, it's called a cockpit.
I think Jim is probably a misogynist to a degree. I mean, anyone who says they're not going to get on a plane because a woman's flying it, He's probably a misogynist.
Certainly not a misogynist. Misogynist means that you hate women, doesn't it? No, I don't hate women. Just don't know how to work them. What was acceptable then is not acceptable now. The rights and wrongs of that will be debated forever. But the things that I did then were totally as acceptable as the stuff that people do now. In 5 years' time, how do we know that what Frankie Boyle is doing now is not acceptable then?
Coming up, Jim's primetime TV career is over.
The BBC suddenly, and without warning, sacked me.
And a desperate return to the spotlight ends in disaster.
You don't call people shirt lifters.
At the height of his fame, Jim Davidson dominated our screens and was Mr. Saturday Night TV.
Tools of the trade, mate.
But after 20 years at the top, Jim's primetime TV career was beginning to stall.
Jim's career declined because he hadn't moved with the times. His views were still outdated, outmoded and not correct. There was just always a feeling about him. Oh, Jim Davidson, yeah. He'd really upset an awful lot of people down the years, an awful lot of people.
Mr. Blobby, here they come!
And rumours circulated that he was increasingly difficult to work with.
I'm afraid Jim did make a lot of enemies with directors and producers because he wanted it done his way and they wanted it done their way. And it had to be their way. And Jim didn't like that.
I don't think the public ever stopped loving Jim. The generations who grew up with him always liked him and stayed loyal to him. It was the TV people who fell out of love with him.
And in 2002, he got some devastating news.
At the end of the generation game, the BBC suddenly, and without warning, sacked me.
It almost became trendy to knock Jim Davidson. They saw him as an old dinosaur, and that wasn't fair. You know, he was a great comedian. Just remember what he's achieved. He's achieved an awful lot.
I think Jim fell out of favour because all of those guys fell out of favour. There was almost like a Pol Pot revolution where they said, we're going to have year zero now. We're going to get rid of all these working class people and get these nice people from Oxford in instead.
And then you had that kind of cultural shift over at Radio 1 where they were getting rid of all the smashy and nicey types. And I suppose he kind of fits into that category. So it was obvious that, you know, all the alternative comedians were going to nudge him out eventually.
Comedy now is almost like a little club that everyone shares the same opinions, whereas people like Jim don't fit in at all. So that's why he had to go, because he didn't ring the right bells with the people who were paying the wages.
I always felt I didn't fit in the BBC, and I think that was because A, I never went to university, and B, I was a bit of a working class Herbert, and I voted Tory. I had this terrible feeling that there was a lot of leftyism going on, what I would say. But nowadays I'm not so bothered about politics, so it doesn't really bother me. But then I really felt as if, do we have to have him? Let him make the shows, but for Christ's sake, don't invite him to any office parties.
And Jim landed himself in more controversy when he refused to perform his stand-up gig at the Plymouth Pavilions.
It was 2,400 people in. I looked out at the front row. I said, normal suspects. You know, there's always the girl with the big knockers, the baldy-headed man. Comedy perfect. And then I looked again, and to my horror, the staff had wheeled 16 wheelchairs out and put them in front of the front row. Now, when I say wheelchairs, these weren't people with mobility problems. These were pretty disabled people. And this woman said, along the lines of, and this is a very near quote, if he moves us, I'm going to call the radio and tell that he's been discriminating against people in wheelchairs. So my old minder said, look, how's Jim going to speak to a front row when they're just disabled people? How do you expect the comic to work this? Can we ask if they're moved? She said, I'm not asking them to move. And I thought, I'm in a hiding to nothing here. If I'm now seen to have those wheelchairs moved, I'm the bad guy. If I go on stage, these people will invariably cause problems with the show. So I went home. I was the bad guy. My fault.
He didn't want to be seen to be making jokes about disabled people. Well, that's not it. You know, you just don't do that.
In 2007, after 5 years away from primetime TV, Jim attempted a comeback on ITV's reality show Hell's Kitchen. His appearance ended in a national uproar.
I think on Hell's Kitchen, Jim Davidson from the start, I don't know whether he got in there and thought, God, why have I signed up for this show? But he was in a bad mood from the start. The pressure obviously got to him. He obviously decided he didn't like Brian Dowling.
Hell's Kitchen was an interesting programme. I found out very quickly it wasn't anything to do with cooking. It was about arguing. And the reason I fell out with Brian Dowling is not because he was gay. It's because he's a cunt. Let's start again.
Jim and Brian Dowling in Hell's Kitchen 2007, they were like itchy and scratchy. They weren't going to get on.
A lot of shirt lifters have the same face, don't they?
Don't say shirt lifters, that's really weird.
I don't care. It's a sort of a preen.
Do I have that look?
No, only when you put it on.
Thank you.
Jim called him a shirt lifter. I don't think he meant anything by that. I know Jim. I know Jim's not homophobic.
You called me a shirt lifter tonight. Was that personal?
No, I didn't call you a shirt lifter.
What did you say?
I said, why do shirt lifters have that certain look? Go on, you play the old homophobic card, mate. You're a f***ing disgrace.
What?
Why do you have to play the homophobic card, Brian, for heaven's sake?
I don't know what you're doing, Jim.
No,
This is your friend.
I know he's my friend, yeah. I'm being me.
Jim was the only person in there who didn't seem to realise that life has moved on. You don't hold these views. You don't call people shirt lifters.
It's a common word used to describe a gay person, really, by people who talk in a working class way, especially from where I come from. It's not meant derogatory. Is it any worse than puff or, you know, whatever the other words are for people?
How can you say that to me? I'm sitting right beside you. I'm an equal to you, Jim, in everything we've ever done.
Sure, that's what
Since
gay
the day
stands for.
we walked
Good
in.
as you. I know that. Does
Do you
not
know
gay
what, Jim?
stand for
Don't say
good
that.
as you?
Do you know what? No, Jim.
not?
Jim, I'm Brian. I'm not good as you. I'm an equal to you.
You don't say Jim.
You're being really, really horrible to me right now.
The actual joke, the words that got upset was I wasn't talking to Brian about that. I was speaking to him about somebody else. And of course it then gets brought up and taken out of context, and I was a bit upset with Brian for playing the homophobic card. You know, you're horrible to me because I'm gay. It wasn't because of that. It's because I didn't like him. He didn't like me. And I got branded homophobic because of that.
And I think it was a shock to him how the public reacted to that. And I think he learnt his lesson.
It amazed me that a man who was reasonably intelligent hadn't caught on to the fact that people don't think that and people don't behave like that these days. And all the comments he got were entirely justified.
For you, it's hard not to have an opinion about people.
Oh, I'm an opinionated old
You're very opinionated.
Of course I am.
But you must understand that the world's changing and that a lot of people don't have the same opinion as you.
You would say that then, wouldn't you?
Would you say
His
that?
clash with fellow contestant Brian Dowling forced him to quit the show.
It was completely wrong, and I'm very glad that he was bounced out of Hell's Kitchen. He should have been, and he was.
Brian wasn't the sort of gay guy that Jim would really get on with. There was a clash of personality as much as anything else. And I don't think he was homophobic. I think he was Brian-phobic.
I've since learnt that it's a word that gay people find derogatory, and I don't use the word again. I'll find another nickname that's funny. You know.
Whether he was doing it to try and establish some weird kind of common ground between the two of them, who knows? But that's what he said, and that was what went out on TV, which, as recently as 2007, is just unacceptable on TV and in life. So he can't really defend himself on that one.
I wish I hadn't have said it. I didn't particularly want to upset Brian. I wasn't that bothered that he was upset. I didn't like him particularly. And he made me realise I was in a programme I shouldn't be with. He made me realise my career was ended. He made me realise that, you know, I was pissed off with being in this programme. I didn't say it to upset him purposely. What I didn't like was him using that against me and making out that I was homophobic. To my mind now, he was to blame for the argument, not me.
Coming up, Jim faces the most enormous challenge of his life.
I got a phone call from a police officer and said, "We're Operation U-Tree, I bet you've been expecting us." And I said, "No, I haven't."
And enjoys one of the biggest comebacks in television history.
Big Brother was the scariest thing really I'd ever done. I was frightened to death.
Britain's most controversial comedian, Jim Davidson, has endured scandals, numerous divorces, and drink and drug problems.
All these girls, I'm not just doing this because you're famous.
Of course you're not, my dear. I found one with a flat head once you could put your pints. Sensational.
By January 2013, he had almost reached rock bottom, but the worst was yet to come. In a final attempt to revive his career, Jim was set to enter the celebrity Big Brother house when disaster struck.
I packed my bag and I come down from Glasgow, our house in Glasgow, about to put my bag into the trolley at Heathrow Airport to go and get in the Big Brother car to relaunch my television career, so to speak. And I got a phone call from a police officer and said, "We're Operation U Tree, I bet you've been expecting us." And I said, "No, I haven't." Well, he said, "We want to speak to you." I said, "Well, look, I'm going in the Big Brother house now. Can't this wait?"
The comedian Jim Davidson is the latest entertainer from the 70s to have been arrested by detectives on suspicion of sexual offences. He was questioned today as part of the Jimmy Savile investigation, but the allegations against him don't relate directly to Savile.
And I couldn't get my head around what it was about. I thought Operation U Tree was about, you know, Jimmy Savile and paedophiles and God knows what. Why are they looking at me? That's never been my game.
You'll get the word Savile attached to it, and then people will go, "Oh, is he one of them? Is he kiddie fiddler?" You know, it's horrible. To have that hanging over you like a cloud, it must concentrate the mind a bit.
Anyway, it turned out that I was arrested for 2 allegations of sexual assault dating back to about 1988, 1989. There's 2 women I'd never heard of said I'd done this, that, and whatever. It's horrible, really. It was really, really horrible, worse than you can imagine. Because although I knew that I hadn't done these things, I thought, well, how come the police don't know this? It's so obvious it wasn't me. So I decided, A, I'd find as much evidence as I could to try and get off of all this, and B, I'd go about my life as normal. By the time we presented our statements to the police, they'd trawled up another 6 complainants, some dating back to 1978. And it was horrible. All the theatres were cancelling. Theatres we were trying to book for the 6-month future said, "Oh no, perhaps we better not do this." Suddenly the pantomime didn't happen. So without going into too many figures, I reckon it's about 600,000 quid's worth of not having that money, and about 100,000 quid's worth of expenses, money paid, minders, spies, lawyers, things. So after 9 months of hard work between my legal team, we'd presented enough evidence for the Crown Prosecution Service to realise there was no prospect of a conviction. And 2 days after my 60th birthday, I was free. I mean, it was the worst time of my life. God knows how my wife coped. What can you do? You got to get on. And when you're really feeling down and miserable and you're sitting there in a room thinking, "Oh, Christ, why me? Why me?" Suddenly, "Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Davidson." You've got to click that button and go on and entertain them people. That's when you earn your money, I can tell you.
It's Jim Davidson.
Having endured the most traumatic 12 months of his life, and a year later than planned, Jim Davidson finally entered the celebrity Big Brother house. This was Jim's final chance to revive his career.
Big Brother was the scariest thing, really, I'd ever done. I was frightened to death. And the audience cheered. I couldn't believe it. I thought someone must have bribed them. I was feeling a bit out of place. I thought I'll be first one out, it don't matter.
Oh my God. I know this sounds a bit weird, but Jim getting nicked by the Operation U Tree investigation was probably, career-wise, a good thing to happen to him, because it gave him a story to take into Big Brother this year.
I think people saw the real Jim in there. You saw how funny he was.
How could this evening be improved?
I could die. Oh, God. Another week.
How? Oh, grumpy, yeah, understandably.
You look like the Grim Reaper walking through the room.
Grow up, Louisa, for fuck's sake. I think people found me funny, and they found me vulnerable, and they found me honest.
Don't say that I don't feel sorry when I'm apologising, because how the fuck do you know what I'm feeling?
Do we have to form a queue to have a fucking argument with you, or do you just willy-nilly pick people?
he had the funny old romance, if you like, going on with Dappy, which I think was quite sweet and touching.
I love Dappy. I really do.
What a wonderful human being. I love that man so much.
I don't like all the negatives. It's supposed to be positive. We one big family, goddammit. Oh, you're sick.
Oh, he's got me on the ropes.
Jim Davidson came across as himself on the show, yeah. There is a dark side. Maybe he can be a little bit cutting, a little bit sarcastic, but I think he behaved himself very, very well. And you see the real Jim, the Jim that we all care for.
Who would you rather make love to, Liz or Linda?
If I had to put a gun against my head, I'd pull the trigger. Roll on death.
I love those sarcastic comments. Yes, all right, roll on death.
In the Big Brother house, we did not see the real man, or the whole man. There are two sides to Jim. One is the very warm, funny, cheeky chappy, maybe a bit grumpy, but basically, you know, a peacemaker. He walked away from arguments. And the other side, which is the side he kept absolutely under control and the lid on it, was the Jim who has made racist, sexist, misogynistic jokes, and the side that has always dragged him down. And he did. It was a brilliant piece of absolutely brilliant piece of acting.
Love you, Linda, always have.
No, you don't. Don't pretend.
Okay, I won't.
I think Jim should have come out of that house and sent a biggest bouquet of flowers he could find to Linda Nolan, because I think she helped a tremendous amount.
Jim is a fucking arsehole, and he has just proved to everybody what an arsehole he is.
She made him the underdog. She made him the victim. She was at him all the time, nagging. It's almost like a stereotypical wife, wouldn't it, after 40 years of marriage?
You said, you brought up the cherry brandy. You brought up the cherry brandy.
Gee.
And we weren't going to bring up the alcohol to them.
Fuck this.
She was kind of all over him. She did give him a bit of a monster in that, you know, she might have thought he deserved it, but most people watching thought, calm down, love.
Fuck it. Go and starve.
I'm frozen.
You're evil woman, you Linda
Oh,
Nolan.
Jim, grow up, for God's sake, you big baby.
I particularly like Linda Nolan. I think she's a good, strong woman. The family's been through a bit of a turmoil lately. And the last thing she needed was to be handcuffed to the bloke she doesn't like. And I think she coped all right with that. On a 1 to 10, I'd give her a 1.5.
It wasn't long until Jim was at the centre of yet another controversy.
Jim brought up a subject very sore to Linda's heart.
Ask her about Frank Carson's dressing room.
And it was a very unfair thing for him to have done.
I knew her husband, Brian, quite a while. He used to be a drummer in a band called Sparrow in the Old Kent Road. I knew him, and the only reason I could have thought I'd have fell out with him, because there was the famous incident in Frank Carson's dressing room.
If you want to talk about Frank Carson's dressing room behind my back, you speak to me about
I don't understand what you mean.
Big, tall, grown-up
What is Frank Carson's dressing room?
The little snidey shit that you are.
I believe that Brian was arrested for stealing money from the dressing room. I believe it's documented somewhere. I asked about that and it touched a nerve, so I asked no more. It's a trivial thing that was blown out of proportion, I think, by the friction. Having said that, did I want to roll a hand grenade into the Linda Nolan camp and see who pulled the pin? Well, we'll never know, will we?
Jim, fuck off. Do me a favour and fuck off. I don't want to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay, well then do me a favour and fuck off.
Okay, fine.
Bringing up Frank Carson's dressing room to Linda was a real low blow, something very, very cruel, and something that he knew would wound her absolutely.
Well, why would you say that if you're not shit-stirring?
Just to piss you off, my little darling.
But all the while Jim was inside the Big Brother house, doubts persisted. Were viewers seeing the real Jim Davidson?
I was working on the premise of all I have to do is to be truthful. And by being truthful, the public will then see I'm a better bloke than they think I am. That was it. So if I wanted to have a drink, I'd have a drink. If I wanted to go to bed early, I'd go to bed early. If I wanted to argue with someone, I'd argue. I'd stand my ground, I'd be me.
He knows this is a game. He knows that this is, if you're smart, you can really win people over. This is what this is about. You know, they want to see celebrities in a truthful environment so that we can say they're human beings.
The Jim that I saw in Big Brother House was the Jim that I saw off stage years ago. It's the Jim that I know that the public didn't know, and now they know him like that as well.
As far as the others are concerned, they were all lovely, but Jim got the public on his side, and that was it.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds to prepare yourself. Your public's waiting, Jim.
And after 27 long days, Jim Davidson emerged as the winner of Celebrity Big Brother with one of the biggest landslide votes in the show's history.
Looking back, the whole experience of Celebrity Big Brother is a bit surreal. You know, I won. And in a way, I think I'm, and with respect to my lovely armed forces, I think I've got a slight bit of post-traumatic stress disorder, because it was a hell of a year, and then it was a hell of an intense month, and then I feel as if I'm dreaming. I won. I can't believe it. Not only did the public vote for me for Big Brother, they voted to say to these people, none of this was Jim, you know. We've always been behind you, Jim, and that's why we're voting for you. We always believed you, and now we've got a chance to show you. It's bizarre. It's the most wonderful feeling.
3 days after winning Celebrity Big Brother, with the British public firmly behind him, Jim couldn't wait to get back on stage and face his fans.
How are you? There's a lot of fat fuckers in here tonight, isn't there? How are you, mate?
I'm good, man.
Yeah, good to see you. Did anyone watch? Why? I'm fucked if I'm doing that again. I've had no sleep for 3 weeks. I've had fucking birds strapping on at the bottom of my bed. I've had nutcases, and if I ever see Linda Nolan again, I think I'll hang myself from the fucking bed. But I made some new friends. Dappy! Oh, fucking Dappy! Oh. You know what I mean? I'm thinking like that. I thought I fucking like the look of him when he walked in. He's like one of them blokes with his arse hanging out of his trousers. You know them ones with where their fucking trousers, my son? Mind you, he's got a Corey about 4 foot long, apparently. Dappy was all right. Dappy was sort of, you know, thinking like that and all that, the thinking all that. So I started to do Dappy to fucking him back. All right, how's it going, Jimmy? All right, you're my brethren. You're my brother. You're my brother! So I said, okay, I'm your brother! This is Big Brother. Will Jim come to the diary room? Really? If I had to do it again? I would shoot me fucking self like that.
So what's next for Jim Davidson?
I don't think Jim minds offending people. You can't do that today. That doesn't work on television. He's got to change that, if he can, if he wants to.
All Jim needs to do to retain his audience is get himself a decent TV show, get some decent writers around him, make sure it's a good show, and just get it on telly as quickly as possible, and then build on that.
Could go either way for Jim Davidson. He could end up just appearing on crap reality shows for the rest of his career, or he could do something strange like turn up as a gangster on EastEnders. I'd quite like to see that, actually.
He was once an institution, and there have been many comedians that have tried and failed, and he was one that succeeded. So if he can do it again, then my thing is that kudos to you, good for you.
I'd like to see him do some modern game shows. I'd like to see him host Have I Got News For You and be on live at the Apollo and be the comedian that he is and can be.
You can't live with regret. You've got to put that to one side. Leave that in the regret locker, if you like to use an American phrase. It will always be there, but you can't go forward while you're looking back. So it's time now for me to move forward. I've had the shit. I don't want any more of that. I'm going forward now. It's time to move on.
Now, some people just can't get enough of the surgeon's knife. 200 nips and tucks, and I want more. New tomorrow at 9. Meanwhile, next tonight here on Channel 5 as the DNA nightmare unravels. Who do you trust? Alan's unsure. Brand new Helix in just a moment.